Have you ever watched a man chase a woman like a dog chases a moving car? Frenzied, breathless, desperate, only to catch up and have no idea what to do once he's there. It is an old story. A man sees beauty across the room, or more often now, on a glowing screen. He feels a sudden emptiness in his chest as if something vital has been stolen, and so he begins the chase. He rewrites his personality. He sacrifices his peace. He builds castles out of text messages and illusions, all for a fantasy, all for a mirage. And then he wonders, why does it still feel hollow? This hunger, this aching need to be validated by the attention, affection, or approval of women. It did not begin with Instagram or dating apps. It has existed for millennia, long before men were swiping or simping or strategizing text responses. It is not new. It is ancient. And one of the first men to call it out, not with polite disapproval, but with raw contempt, was Diogenes of Sinope. Diogenes, the barefoot madman of ancient Greece, was not a man of compromise. He lived in a barrel. He defecated in public. He spat on wealth and mocked power. But what disturbed people most wasn't his rudeness. It was his clarity. He exposed the human condition with the precision of a scalpel, not because he hated people, but because he hated their illusions. And when it came to men who devoted their lives to the pursuit of women, who bent their backs for attention, who crumbled their dignity for desire, Diogenes saw something worse than weakness. He saw slavery. But what did he really mean? And more importantly, is he still right? We live in a time where gender roles are being rewritten, where dating is both more accessible and more confusing than ever. Yet the desperation, the need to be chosen, the hunger for feminine approval still haunts many men like a shadow that won't lift. This script is not an attack on love. It is not an argument for loneliness or celibacy. It is an exploration of why men chase, of what they're really running from, of how power, true power, slips away the moment you place your worth in someone else's hands. Through Diogenes' brutal lens, through the layers of philosophy, psychology, and lived experience, we'll unearth a truth many refuse to face. Sometimes the chase is not about love at all, it is about escape. From the self, from the silence, from the terrifying question, who am I when no one wants me? This is the uncomfortable beginning, and from here we go deeper. To understand what Diogenes was truly condemning, we need to travel back. Back to a time when masculinity was not defined by filtered photos or gym check-ins, but by power, presence, and philosophy. Ancient Greece was the birthplace of Western thought, and yet even there, where reason was worshipped and the soul was studied, men were often reduced to slaves of their own longing. Diogenes watched them closely. Not just the kings and the soldiers, but the poets and the philosophers too. Men who were brilliant in debate, courageous in battle, yet crumbled when faced with the softness of a woman's gaze. He watched how their minds turned to mush, how their sense of self was handed over like a coin at a marketplace. And he saw something tragic. Because to Diogenes, the man who needs to chase is already lost. This was not just about physical desire. It was about dependence. It was about men defining themselves through someone else's reflection. Diogenes understood what few dared to admit, that many men seek women not because they are full, but because they are empty. They run toward others hoping to escape the great hollowness within. And it's not just Diogenes. The ancient world is full of warnings about men who lose themselves in the pursuit of women. In the Bible, we find Samson, the strongest man, brought down not by armies, but by his obsession with Delilah. In the Indian epic Mahabharata, the powerful warrior Karna gives away his divine armor and earrings, his only protection, in a desperate attempt to please and impress. In Chinese philosophy, Confucianism taught restraint, composure, and mastery of the self, qualities that evaporate when lust dominates action. Even in Greek mythology, the story of Narcissus is not just about vanity. It's about the illusion of love. He falls for his own reflection, dies chasing what cannot love him back. A mirror, not a relationship. A projection, not a partner. The Greeks knew this well. Eros is not only romantic. Eros is chaos. Eros is fire that consumes. The philosopher Plato warned that being in love can blind reason, that the pursuit of physical beauty, when left unchecked, can destroy a man's intellect and soul. Yet, in contrast, many societies encourage the chase, the knight rescuing the damsel, the prince winning the princess. Stories framed desire as noble, even spiritual. In medieval Europe, courtly love was about proving devotion through suffering. A man would pine, ache, and sometimes die for the chance to be seen. Not loved, just seen. But what does that really teach? That a man's worth is proven by how much he sacrifices for her approval. Fast forward to the 20th century. The romantic ideal reaches its peak in Hollywood. Think of the movies. The persistent guy who wears her down. The nerd who wins the girl after years of rejection. The message is clear. If you chase long enough, love will reward you. But these tales rarely mention the men who burned out, who lost years, who shaped themselves around another's preferences, only to be discarded when they no longer entertained. The chase became not just normalized, but glorified. And today, it's taken on a digital face. Algorithms reward attention-seeking. Dating apps gamify desire. A man might swipe through hundreds of faces in a day, hoping to find meaning in pixels. Social media adds another layer. Followers mistaken for connection, likes mistaken for worth. Modern men are often told they must prove themselves worthy of love, that they must chase, that they must become something for someone else. But Diogenes would ask, what if you are already enough? What if the very act of chasing proves you believe you are not? That's the brutal paradox. A man who truly knows his worth does not run after others to validate it. In Diogenes' time, men pursued virtue, arete, above all. Self-sufficiency was prized. To be ruled by no one, especially not one's own desires, was the ultimate freedom. Diogenes mocked those who were enslaved by lust, because to him they had forfeited their sovereignty. They were no longer men. They were addicts. He once saw a young man blush in front of a beautiful woman and said, "A blush is the color of virtue." But he didn't mean this as praise. He was mocking the pretense. Because behind the charm and flirtation, he saw fear. Fear of rejection. Fear of being invisible. And where there is fear, there is no freedom. In this context, chasing women is not a sign of masculinity. It is a sign of fracture, of displacement. The chase becomes a substitute for self-worth. This idea finds echoes in the Stoics too. Epictetus warned that the more you desire things outside your control, the more you suffer. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, reminded himself daily, "Do not waste what remains of your life in speculating about others unless it is for some mutual benefit." The Stoics didn't shame desire, but they refused to be ruled by it. And Diogenes, he took it one step further. He didn't just resist the chase, he exposed it. He once saw a man preparing for a romantic evening, perfumed and nervous, adjusting his clothes in the mirror. Diogenes laughed and said, "You are polishing your chains." That's what he saw. Chains. Today, those chains are often dressed in designer suits or clever captions. But they're still chains. Chains of expectation. Chains of performance. Chains that make men believe their value is external, their wholeness conditional. But the truth is older than apps and older than heartbreak. If you chase to feel enough, you will always be running. The real question is not whether you should pursue love. It is whether you've built a life worth sharing before you offer it to someone else. Love that comes from fullness is peace. Love that comes from hunger is war. and too many men are wounded soldiers, convinced the battlefield is called romance. Now that we have traced the ancient roots of the chase, the ceaseless pursuit of women by men driven less by love than by a deep inner emptiness, it is time to examine the psychology behind this relentless pattern. Why do so many men find themselves caught in this loop, desperate for approval, validation, and connection, yet never feeling fully satisfied or free? Modern psychology offers profound insight into this age-old dilemma, helping us understand what Diogenes observed with such brutal clarity. It shows us that chasing women is often a symptom, not a cause, a sign of deeper wounds and unconscious beliefs about self-worth, identity, and belonging. At the core lies a concept called attachment theory. Developed in the mid-20th century by psychologist John Bowlby, attachment theory explains how early childhood relationships, especially with caregivers, shape how we relate to others as adults. Simply put, if a child grows up feeling safe, valued, and secure, they develop a secure attachment style. They trust that others will be there for them and feel confident in themselves. But if a child experiences neglect, inconsistency, or rejection, they can develop insecure attachment styles, anxious, avoidant, or disorganized. Men with anxious attachment tend to crave closeness but fear abandonment. They often feel desperate to win approval from partners, constantly chasing love to soothe an inner sense of insecurity. This mirrors what Diogenes saw: the man who chases not because of genuine love, but because of fear of being alone, invisible, or unworthy. This is not a failure of character. It is an echo of early emotional experiences. The chase becomes a desperate attempt to rewrite a story that began long before adulthood, a story of longing to be seen, to be loved unconditionally. Psychologist Erich Fromm once wrote that many people confuse love with the need to possess or be possessed. They confuse it with a hunger that demands satisfaction. He called this the difference between having and being. Men who chase women often focus on having her attention, having her approval, rather than being authentic, whole, and at peace with themselves. This dynamic creates a paradox. The more you try to have love by chasing, the further you drift from actually being lovable. Carl Jung's archetypes add another layer to this understanding. Jung described the anima as the unconscious feminine side within every man, a source of creativity, intuition, and emotional depth. When the anima is unintegrated, when a man is disconnected from his own inner femininity, he projects it outward onto women. He idealizes, chases, and often fears women because they represent an unknown, unacknowledged part of himself. Diogenes might have seen this as madness masked by desire, the man chasing what he has not yet accepted within. The external hunt is actually an internal fragmentation. This explains why chasing women often leads to confusion and frustration. The man is not really chasing the woman herself. He is chasing an elusive feeling of wholeness, safety, and love that he has not yet found inside. Psychology also shows us the role of social conditioning and cultural narratives. From childhood, boys receive mixed messages about masculinity. They are told to be strong, independent, and self-reliant, but also to prove their worth through conquest and approval, often by impressing women. This contradictory messaging creates confusion and pressure. Social psychologist Robert Glover calls this the nice guy syndrome, where men try to earn love by being overly accommodating or chasing approval, rather than expressing their true selves. This syndrome traps men in a cycle of neediness, disguised as kindness, but rooted in fear of rejection. Our modern dating culture amplifies these pressures. The abundance of choices, the instant feedback loops of likes and matches, and the performative nature of social media create what psychologists call the paradox of choice. Too many options make it harder to settle, harder to feel confident, and easier to fall into chasing as a way to prove one's value. Yet, paradoxically, research shows that self-esteem and authentic connection, not quantity or conquest, predicts relationship satisfaction. The men who stop chasing, who stop seeking external validation, and who begin to cultivate a grounded, secure sense of self tend to attract healthier relationships. Even the ancient wisdom of Sufi mystics echoes this modern insight. They taught that true love is not about possession or chasing, but about surrender. Surrender to the self, to the divine, and to the flow of life. This surrender is not weakness but strength, a radical acceptance that allows love to emerge naturally, unforced. So, where does this leave the man who chases? It leaves him at a crossroads. On one path is continued pursuit, wearing the mask, feeding the hunger, losing more of himself with every chase. On the other is the challenge of self-mastery, to face the fears beneath the chase, to meet the shadow that whispers, "You are not enough," to embrace the silence and the void without running. This is the moment of awakening Diogenes demanded, to stop polishing the chains and start breaking them. Pause for a moment and ask yourself, when was the last time you chased someone and felt truly at peace afterward? When was the last time you chose yourself over the chase? The brutal truth is not that chasing women is wrong, but that chasing out of neediness is a form of self-betrayal. The path forward requires courage, not just the courage to pursue love, but the courage to pursue yourself. Understanding the psychology behind the chase is crucial, but what often goes unnoticed are the deep, often invisible wounds it leaves behind. For the man who chases for the women caught in the dance and for the relationships that might have been. The consequences ripple far beyond fleeting heartbreak or awkward rejection. They seep into identity, self-esteem, and the very core of how men experience themselves in the world. At its root, chasing women out of a place of inner lack creates a paradoxical loneliness. The more a man pursues, the more disconnected he becomes, not only from the object of his desire, but from himself. It is a paradox that Diogenes understood long ago. The man who desperately wants to connect often finds himself more isolated than ever. This emotional isolation arises because chasing is fueled by an external validation loop. Every moment spent seeking approval becomes a moment distracted from self-awareness. The man fragments his attention between who he is and who he thinks he should be to win approval. Over time, this internal split erodes his confidence and his sense of authenticity. Men trapped in this cycle often describe feeling exhausted, defeated, and disoriented. It is as if they are actors playing roles that do not fit, wearing masks that grow heavier with each performance. Psychologists refer to this as the false self, a persona constructed to hide vulnerability and meet external expectations. It is a survival mechanism, but one that slowly eats away at genuine connection and self-respect. The false self is not sustainable. It demands constant maintenance, whether through chasing, impressing, or performing. The inevitable moment comes when the facade cracks, often in the form of anxiety, depression, or a crushing sense of emptiness. This personal crisis, while painful, can also be a turning point. Many men realize that the chase has never been about love. It has been about escape, from loneliness, from fear, from the terrifying silence of being alone with their true selves. Look through history and literature, and you see this theme repeatedly. The great myths of men undone by desire are not simply cautionary tales about women. They are stories about the dangers of losing oneself in longing. Consider the Greek myth of Orpheus and Eurydice. Orpheus, the gifted musician, descends into the underworld to reclaim his lost love. Yet, in a moment of weakness, he looks back, and Eurydice vanishes forever. The myth is about trust, patience, and the tragedy of failing to hold on to what is most precious because of impulsive fear. In the same way, men who chase recklessly often lose their own power. The emotional consequences reach beyond heartbreak. They shape future relationships and how men view themselves. Research supports this. Studies show that men who define their worth through external validation tend to have lower relationship satisfaction, higher anxiety, and more difficulty forming secure attachments. They are more likely to experience feelings of rejection deeply and carry those wounds forward, sometimes even into unrelated areas like work or friendships. Socially, the chase fuels unhealthy dynamics. Women, too, feel the weight of expectation and objectification when men pursue relentlessly. They become prizes rather than partners, mirrors reflecting not who they are, but what the man wants to prove about himself. This dynamic can breed resentment, mistrust, and misunderstanding between genders, reinforcing cycles of frustration on both sides. The cultural glorification of the chase, through movies, media, and social scripts, makes these wounds invisible or even desirable. Men are told to be persistent, to prove their worth, to never give up. But the emotional cost is rarely discussed. Diogenes' laughter echoes here as a profound rebuke. He would ask us to see past the myth of noble pursuit to the reality of personal enslavement. The consequences also extend to identity. When a man's value is tied to external approval, especially from women, he risks losing a sense of who he really is. He becomes a collection of attributes aimed at pleasing others rather than a whole human being with unique thoughts, feelings, and dreams. This identity crisis often manifests as confusion or self-doubt. Men may ask, "Who am I beyond my ability to attract or keep a partner? What if I am unlovable as I am?" Such questions can trigger existential anxiety, a feeling of being lost in the world without an anchor. But there is hope. Recognizing these consequences is the first step toward healing. Historically, some men chose a different path, one of self-mastery and self-respect. The Stoics practiced detachment not from love, but from the need to control or chase it. Marcus Aurelius wrote about loving the fate that life gives without desperation or grasping. He found freedom in acceptance, not in conquest. Similarly, Diogenes lived his philosophy openly and without apology. He showed that freedom comes not from having more, but from needing less. He dared to be the man who laughed at the chase, who held a lantern not to find a woman in the daylight but to find himself in the dark. The consequences of chasing women without self-awareness are profound, but they are not the end. They can become the soil in which a deeper, truer sense of self can grow. Ask yourself, what costs have you paid in chasing approval or love? How has it shaped your sense of self and your relationships? And what might change if you stopped running toward someone else and started running toward yourself? Having walked through the painful terrain of chasing women, the roots, the psychology, and the heavy consequences, it might feel tempting to believe that the problem lies simply in stopping the chase. But the deeper truth is far more complex. To break free from this cycle means not only to stop running after others, but to begin running toward yourself, with courage, compassion, and patience. This journey inward is where healing and transformation begin. It requires unlearning patterns embedded for years or even lifetimes, and replacing them with habits that build true self-worth, emotional resilience, and authentic connection. The process is neither quick nor easy, but it is deeply rewarding. The first step is self-awareness. Notice your patterns without judgment. When do you find yourself chasing? What emotions arise? Anxiety, loneliness, fear? Keeping a journal can be a powerful tool here. Write honestly about your experiences, your feelings, and your triggers. This simple act of observing creates distance from the automatic behaviors that keep you stuck. Pause now and ask yourself, when did I last chase approval? And what was I really seeking in that moment? What would happen if I let that need rest for a while? Next, cultivate secure attachment within yourself. This means becoming your own reliable source of love and validation. It sounds paradoxical because we often think love must come from others, but true connection starts internally. One powerful practice is mindful self-compassion. When feelings of rejection or inadequacy surface, try responding as you would to a dear friend, with kindness, understanding, and patience. Kristen Neff S. work on self-compassion offers simple exercises like placing a hand over your heart and saying, "This is hard right now, but I am here for you." Simultaneously, build emotional regulation skills. Emotional storms can trigger chasing impulses. Practices like deep breathing, meditation, or grounding exercises help calm the nervous system, creating space for thoughtful response rather than reactive pursuit. The ancient Stoics offer profound wisdom here. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." This means recognizing that you cannot control others' feelings or actions, but you can control your response. Another vital shift is reframing masculinity. Instead of chasing as a way to prove worth, embrace vulnerability as strength. Brené Brown's research shows that vulnerability fosters connection and courage, challenging the old scripts of masculinity based on conquest and stoicism. Engage in honest conversations with trusted friends or mentors about your struggles and growth. Sharing your journey breaks isolation and normalizes the challenges men face. Integrating your inner feminine, to borrow Jung's term, also enriches this path. Creative expression, emotional openness, and intuition connect you to a fuller sense of self beyond traditional masculinity. This integration reduces the urge to project idealized images onto women and fosters genuine relationships. Therapy or coaching can be invaluable here. Professional guidance helps uncover unconscious patterns, heal wounds, and develop healthier relationship skills. In parallel, embrace the power of setting boundaries. Healthy relationships are built on respect, both giving and receiving. Learning to say no, to prioritize your well-being, and to recognize when chasing crosses into unhealthy territory is essential. Practicing gratitude for yourself and others shifts focus from lack to abundance. When you appreciate your qualities, talents, and growth, chasing loses its grip. Finally, foster patience. Transformation is gradual. Celebrate small victories, moments when you choose to pause instead of chase, when you speak your truth instead of performing. Remember the Sufi mystics who taught love is not possession, but surrender. Surrender is not giving up, but letting go of control, trusting life's flow, and allowing love to come naturally. Imagine living from this place, grounded, whole, and free, not chasing shadows but embodying presence. This is the freedom Diogenes laughed about. Pause and reflect. What small step can you take today to stop chasing and start choosing yourself? How can you honor your journey toward authentic connection, both with others and within? The path is yours to walk, with courage and compassion lighting the way. As we draw this exploration to a close, take a moment to feel the weight of what we have uncovered, and the promise it holds. The story of men chasing women is not just a tale of desire or rejection. It is a story about the search for self, the longing for belonging, and the courage it takes to face the raw truth within. From Diogenes' lantern in ancient Athens to the psychological studies of today, the message remains clear. Chasing others to find worth only deepens the distance from yourself. It is a timeless paradox that many men live unknowingly, repeating a dance that leaves them exhausted and empty. But there is a different way. A way marked not by relentless pursuit, but by steady presence. Not by proving worth through others' approval, but by owning your own value. Not by seeking connection through desperation, but by allowing connection through authenticity. This journey inward is the most radical act of courage a man can undertake. It demands honesty, vulnerability, and above all, patience. The masks we wear have served a purpose, but they are no longer the gateway to love or fulfillment. They are barriers. As you reflect on this, consider the broader meaning. When a man stops chasing and begins to understand himself, he changes not only his relationships with women, but his relationship with the world. He begins to see women not as prizes to be won, but as fellow travelers on the human journey. each with their own fears, hopes, and complexities. This shift is subtle but profound. It invites empathy where there was objectification, connection where there was pursuit, and respect where there was conquest. The lessons from history and psychology guide us here. Diogenes, the Stoics, Jungian archetypes, and modern research all converge on one truth. Freedom lies in self-mastery. When a man masters his inner world, he no longer needs to chase shadows outside. But mastery does not mean perfection or rigidity. It means embracing the full spectrum of your humanity, the light and the shadow, the strength and the vulnerability. It means choosing presence over performance and growth over fear. Pause for a moment now. What would it mean for you to live from this place? To step into a life where your worth is not measured by conquests or approvals, but by your integrity and self-awareness. How might your relationships transform if they were grounded in authenticity instead of chasing? In this space, love becomes less about possession and more about presence. It becomes a shared dance, not a one-sided pursuit. The world needs men who can hold this kind of love, steady, respectful, and free. Men who are not afraid to carry their own light, even when others are searching in the dark. And you can be one of them. The path forward is not easy, but it is possible, and it begins with a single choice: to stop chasing shadows and start embracing your whole self. As you walk this path, remember that you are not alone. Across time and culture, countless men have faced the same struggles, wrestled with the same questions, and found ways to live more fully. Let their stories inspire you. Let their courage remind you that growth is possible, even when the journey feels long. Thank you for taking this time to reflect deeply on what it means to chase and what it means to truly find. Now that you have walked through the deep truths behind chasing, the hidden wounds it leaves, and the path toward healing and self-mastery, I want to invite you into something important. This space we share here is more than just information. It is a place for real growth, for emotional intelligence, and for meaningful reflection. You are not alone in this journey. We all wrestle with desires, fears, and the longing to be truly seen and loved. But what if you could reclaim your personal power, not by chasing, but by mastering yourself? What if the freedom you seek begins with self-awareness, with choosing presence over performance? Here, we explore the wisdom of history's great thinkers alongside modern psychology, weaving together stories, insights, and practical tools that help you grow stronger, wiser, and more authentic every day. This is a community for those who want to live with purpose, integrity, and emotional depth. If you resonate with this journey, if you want to move beyond superficial advice and dive into the heart of what it means to be human, I encourage you to subscribe and walk this path with us. Together, we will explore how power really operates, how to set healthy boundaries, regulate emotions, and lead with integrity. This channel is not about quick fixes or empty motivation. It is about honest work on yourself, about embracing your full complexity and stepping into the man you are meant to be. It is about breaking free from the old stories that no longer serve you and creating a new narrative of strength rooted in self-trust and compassion. So, if you are ready to stop chasing shadows and start embodying your own light, join us. Subscribe and be part of a community committed to growth, reflection, and true connection. Because your journey matters, and the best is yet to come.